Hello, my name is Cataline Ploe, and I am the developer behind DIMS. Every application written tries to help its users in performing their duties better and faster. User or company employee productivity is dependent on his knowledge on the topic, their organizational skills, and the tools and software provided by the employer to help him performing his duties. DIMS application tries to help user in all these aspects, and this video will try to cover each of them. Let's start with first aspect, which is knowledge on the topic. The knowledge on products company uses can be found on the vendor's websites and in the years of experience each employee has in the field. Sometimes information from these places is placed inside documents of different types like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and so on. The knowledge on company internal procedures follows the same approach, and user needs to use a variety of applications in order to access and make use of that knowledge. DIMS tackles this by storing the most important knowledge inside the application and provide access to it via a tabular format in which each column represents a topic and each cell content is a keyword belonging to that topic, and this keyword is associated with more information about that keyword. Once a keyword is selected, the legend feature of the application displays the associated information to the user. DIMS tackles the second aspect of user productivity, which is his organizational skills, and more exactly his ability to remember where the information he needs to answer a request is stored. Depending on the user experience in the field, we look to either a single notepad containing all the commands he needs, or to an OneNote document containing detailed information about the tasks and how they were performed or have to be performed. DIMS tackles this need by displaying a various set of scripts and keywords in different formats, as a list, as some combo boxes, and as a tree view. Each format comes with its own perks, but the most important one is that helps the user in organizing the scripts and information he can use to solve different kind of requests. You can see me using the tree view format to search and select a script that I can use to see the current processes executing on the SQL Server, and using the legend feature for the output of that script, followed by collapsing the main topics in which scripts are organized at the application level. Third aspect of the user productivity is the tool he can use to retrieve data, consume it, come to a conclusion, and share the conclusion back to the requester. DIMS tackles this by providing its users the needed features to perform all the enumerated activities. We will exemplify it by adding a new script to the application, executing the script to retrieve the data, creating legends for the script columns to give more meaning to the script. We will use the script output and consume it using different options, and we share the outcome to colleagues via an Outlook message. Once the script is added to the application, we can search after it in its list view format or tree view format. Select it and execute it. Once script is executed, the result is displayed in tabular format. And user can use the Table Tools tab at the top of the application to access some of the features via buttons, or he can use the wrench tool at the bottom right of the application to reach and use some of the other features of the application. We can use the Add Edit Legend feature to associate more meaning to the columns of the script. We can see how the script result was consumed using distinct values feature, distinct to columns feature, horizontal and vertical hierarchical display feature, transposing rows feature, new column feature, advanced aggregations feature, more options feature for the columns belonging to the results set, mini pivot feature, and so on. You could see me at some point splitting a date time identified column to its year, quarter, months, days, parts, and use these new columns with hierarchical feature and other features. For the next 3 minutes, you will see me exemplifying the features. Hence, let's start showing the features one by one and speak about their usage, or when we should use them. Legend is just displaying more information about the script and the column meaning, or sometimes the meaning of the value belonging to that column. Distinct values is just a way to shred the result set and provide a meaningful subset of that information. Distinct to columns allow us some kind of basic pivoting, and it is useful in different scenarios. Hierarchical display is very useful because it can give more meaning to the end user than its tabular representation, and is by far the feature I use the most while using the application. For example, for a datetime column, we can find out the pattern of another column. In our example, we can figure out using this feature the months or the days in which companies raise the most claims. If the data retrieved is backup information, then we can find out the days in which we have the most failed backups and see if this happens via pattern like every Monday, and so on. If the result set contains configuration information for 2 servers, we can see how they differ from one server to another. Copy to tabular feature allows the user to share the data with other colleagues via most used communication channels like Outlook client or Teams. The feature was created because we want to give the colleagues the opportunity to use the data we provide. Sometimes pictures are good enough, but sometimes the users consuming the data share the data they receive with other people. Hence, by providing data in text format, you allow them to copy-paste portions of it, which is very useful and increase everyone's productivity and decrease manual typing. For the time being, sometimes the generation of the tabular format in HTML cannot be saved in clipboard and saved to disk, and we have to open that file using Chrome or other web browser and copy that info from there and paste it into the communication channel of choice. Of course, this communication channel needs to allow HTML content. The file is created by default in a specific folder in the user profile, and it is not opened automatically using the user default web browser. The user needs to manually navigate to the path where the file is stored and open himself. Up to this point, I haven't found a solution or a better way of overcoming the issue when generating the HTML from its grid representation, but this is something on my list to do, since without it the user requires additional manual work which should be avoided. On top of that, most of the channels allowing HTML data are trying to fit the content to the screen, which means that sometimes the data we shared or the columns of the data we shared will have a very small width which affects the readability of that data. Hence, we need another way of sharing the data in a more human readable way. This need leads to the transpose rows feature, which is helpful when the number of columns we want to share with our colleagues affects its human readability, and it's displaying by Outlook clients or Teams communication channels. For example, using distinct to columns feature, we end up with a result set that is 30 columns, which will make more sense when shared to be shared after we transpose the information, because it allows the user to better see the data. Throughout the video, you could see me using the filtering feature. This feature allows the user to filter the result set. I haven't tested it with huge amount of data selection, meaning that I haven't filtered to 3,000 rows by selecting 2,999,000 rows. I am sure that in those cases, I might end up with conditions for which I haven't written code, nor provide a meaningful way of informing the user about this situation. The application was written and tested to work with metadata, meaning with result sets from 1 to 5,000 rows, which are all loaded in the memory. Hence, the memory footprint of the application is quite big when working with large result sets. New column feature is an attempt to add more value to the result set, in case you want to use the value in some column as input data for another column. For example, we want to find out the number of claims per year, or the suffix of the companies with the most claims. We can use this feature to add the column, and once it's added, we can use again other features to take advantage of the new column and its data. The column is added to the script which is currently selected, which is why in the video you will see the column being added to the right side, and after that to the left side, which is the result set for which I want to create the column. We can use, for example, the aggregations feature to compute the total number of claims, or number of claims grouped by other column. The next feature presented is the result set more options feature, which targets the result set columns. Sometimes we want to obtain for specific columns in our result set the min, max, sum, count, average values, or to just use that column to create new columns or compute various values for it. Of course, that if the script used to retrieve the data is not hard-coded in the application, you can modify the script to retrieve that column value when script is executed and not create those columns by hand. Another feature or option in the application is the concatenate strings option. This option is useful when we want to manually select specific cells from the result set. Mini pivot feature and execute SQL script feature that you can see in the next seconds are described later in the video. Let's suppose that the team in charge of the application have provided some built-in dashboards, but you want to create a personal dashboard. You can do that using the dashboard template provided. The only things you need to do is to have the TSQL scripts you will use to retrieve the data and paste those scripts by replacing the current scripts of the current template. You will see me selecting a dashboard script and chose dashboard scripts as script location and replacing some of the queries with the queries we want. For the time being, the new dashboard is not automatically recognized, and the user needs to restart the application for the dashboard report to appear in the available selections. Once the application is restarted, we can choose the dashboard tab on the left side of the application. Choose the instance against the dashboard script will be executed, and choose the script, which contains the queries needed to retrieve the data that will be charted. Each chart in the dashboard comes with 3 buttons, one to increase the chart size, to decrease it, and to change the chart type from the default one in case we think a different chart type is more suitable for that result set. Since the script I used as an example, it's not suitable for charting, you wouldn't see much, but looking to the other scripts in the template will give you enough information to get started and come with the right script. This dashboard feature is just another way to see aggregate information from a SQL Server in a graphical way. Due to the chart type and the hard-coded 12 charts per dashboard, an enable loop was implemented which increases each chart for a 10 seconds period. Also, options for charts labels and its horizontal and vertical starting points was provided in order to give the user the ability to fit more text for the charts labels. Please note that not all charts looks great, and there is still work to do, but for specific charts, displaying specific amounts of data, the graphical presentation is more than enough. In the next almost 2 minutes, you can see me executing the dashboard we just created and changing some of the chart properties enumerated before, or enabling, disabling the chart dashboard loop. If you want to skip this, please forward to minute 8:30, where I will present the notebook feature of the application. This video presents the mini pivot feature of the application and the graphical representation of the numerical values using line chart. Sometimes we want to display pivoting information of the result set without leaving the application, hence I decided to write a proof of concept that lead to this new feature. The use of the feature is straightforward and consists in retrieving the result set, selecting the columns of the result set, which will be used for rows, columns, and values, and for the values the sum aggregate function is applied by default. If we want, we can add another column to the pivoting operation, which will display graphically the values. This video presents the scheduler feature of the application. This proof of concept was created in order to be able to execute scripts at specific time intervals. The script we want to schedule and execute this feature are scripts which retrieve metadata information or result sets that are small in nature. This feature is not suitable to retrieve 1,000 rows every 5 seconds. The end of this video is a proof of concept of executing some store procedure in order to test its performance. I haven't used this feature also to many times in real life, but I had 2 or 3 occurrences where I had to use it. It is better to have it than not to have it, not to mention that the logic you might be writing for this feature can be used for other similar features. At least this was my way of thinking every time I created a new proof of concept for a new feature for the DIMS application. In this video, you will see me adding TSQL scripts, setting the instance against they will run, the execution interval, and how we can see the results obtained. You can fast forward and watch the video by jumping from one timestamp to another if time constraints and watching this presentation requires it. This video presents the merger feature of the application, and it was written after the notebook feature of the application. It came to life because I wanted to be able to select specific columns from the result set and display them in a data grid, and use the drag and drop feature of the columns to move them around. The video shows the retrieval of some metadata information and selection of the columns we want to share with other people. Once the column or the entire set is selected, is added to the data grid at specific positions. The data can be added horizontally or vertically, meaning we can store column or result set next to each other or under each other. Once we selected the columns or result set we want to share, we can select the tab, which will allow us to move those columns as an entity to a different place. This feature from time to time might save time when trying to share some data with your colleagues. If we want to achieve the same in Excel, it would take more time because Excel was not developed specifically for this type of activity. The feature doesn't have a huge applicability, and I haven't used it in real life as often as other features the application has, but I wanted to have it at user disposal in case they fall in one of these edge case scenarios in which they might have a need to use it. The video is longer than this, but it was trimmed because I believe whatever presented till now gave enough insight about the feature and its purpose. This video presents formatting data grid cell feature. Sometimes after the result set was obtained, we want to send a print screen with some of the data to some of our colleagues, and it will be hard to explain the cells without a legend based on color system. We cannot refer to cells content via their row index and column index, hence the need of setting result set cells background color or text color made sense, and was implemented as a feature of the application. For the time being, the coloring performed in the application is not kept when using copy to tabular feature of the application, but this can be done if required. Due to virtualization of data grid rows and columns, the coloring of the cells seems to not work as expected, but it is only because I am not clearing the data grid cell formatting during the unloading row event and formatting them again back during the loading row event. This was implemented as part of Compare Excel file features, which came to life in August 2024, while this feature presented in this video was implemented maybe one or more than 1 year ago. The work to keep the modifications made to data grid cells when using copy to tabular format feature requires to store the coloring information and add the required HTML attributes for the HTML table cells to reflect HTML table cell background or text foreground. It was not implemented at this point because each feature comes to life as a proof of concept, and sometimes this new feature requires other features to be updated in order to take into account the outcome of this new feature. In the case of this feature, the copy to tabular feature was not updated to take it into account, but as I said, it can be done. I am using this feature by filtering the data grid to contain the rows I want to describe, modifying the colors, making print screen of those cells, and pasting it in Outlook client or Teams channel. Repeating the process for other parts of the result set if needed. This video shows how a PowerShell script can be used to test for server compliance. The implementation using GUI had to take advantage of the features already supported by the application, which among others are retrieving data from SQL Server databases, executing PowerShell scripts, filtering the result set, and call a related script. So the inner working of this feature is that we have a table in the database which contains the things we want to check. That information is paired with a PowerShell script which, based on the selections made, filtering an out case, will check each alert and its threshold, and will let the user know if server is compliant with the thresholds or not. If the server is compliant, then we will not have additional message displayed for the alert, while if the setting on the server is different, then we will display the items which are not compliant and requires attention. This type of implementation is just another way of adding more value to some PowerShell scripts. Sometimes teams create PowerShell scripts for specific purposes, but they're missing a graphical user interfaces to call those scripts and make the most of them. DIMS is trying to achieve this and bring more value to those scripts. This video presents Get Growth option of the hierarchical display feature, and it came to life as part of Guidewire minor releases. Every 2 weeks, we are asked to provide information about the backups taken previously as part of the minor release. Among this information is backup growth between releases, hence, I decided to obtain that using the GUI. We retrieve the backup information for the servers we need, we filter the result set after the backups taken to disk, and with specific date, we display hierarchical that information, and from the context menu we choose Get Growth to see how it grew over time. The option Get Growth can be applied to other type of result sets, as long as the last column we added to the hierarchy is numeric. We can also present the growth over time in other formats by using the More option feature of the result set, which gives us the possibility to break the datetime column in its parts, year, quarter, month, and once done we can recreate the hierarchy using those columns and compute the growth again. This video shows the POC from Mini Performance Monitor. I created this proof of concept because, like I stated previously, I wanted the user to have access to some of the tools he needs to gather the data in order to come to a conclusion when it comes to SQL Server questions. This proof of concept was created a long time ago. The video is the video I posted on LinkedIn when the proof of concept was created, but the text was added just now, hence I don't remember much about the inner working of this feature. What I can tell now is that I wanted to have access to the same counters Performance Monitor application tool has and pull the values of those counters and save them for further reference. It was also created in order to have access to the counter meaning. Although the application contains dictionaries with keywords, and their meaning for a lot of things is not covering all the keywords for all the topics. As with every other proof of concept created for the application, the use of it was limited to its development phase, and I never used it against production servers at work. I tried it against the UAT servers, but to have it ran against prod servers requires more tests and safeties in place that it doesn't affect the overall server performance. You will see me selecting some of the counters and the values of those counters displayed graphically and in tabular format. The feature comes with some basic options like the duration for which we save the counters and interval in seconds at which we retrieve the values for those counters. The LinkedIn video was trimmed to cover only the first minute of it, but the first 60 seconds are more than enough to make sense of the feature. The video shows load scripts from this feature. This feature is useful if we want to load some TSQL or PowerShell scripts and execute them if they are trusted and aligned with the expected output the application expects, which is a single result set for both TSQL and PowerShell scripts. A part of executing those scripts, we can search and display the content of those scripts. I used Open File Dialog. Open Folder Dialog WinForm seems to require more work and modifications when using WPF. That is opening a shortcut which points to a folder in which we have TSQL scripts and PowerShell scripts. I noticed that GitHub repositories and other stores data like this, and check folders in that folder that contains .SQL or .ps scripts and add them to the application. It will check also one level deep for subfolders containing .SQL or .ps and add them to the application also. I used expanders and combo boxes for this nested structure. This feature was enhanced shortly after this video was made to search also for specific location inside the script where the word we search after is. P.S. I used Meteor Data/Meteor Toolbox GitHub repository by chance. This video shows the implementation of re-executing the script and combining the script output. The application was creating a new tab every time we wanted to execute the script again. I realized that this means I need to select the instance against I want to execute the script. I need to select the script and press the execute button, which meant a lot of manual work. Since this application aims to help the user and automate things, I implemented the refreshing script feature, which is just re-executing the script previously executed and save the result. There is a hard-coded value for the number of times the script can be re-executed, and I believe it is 24, but this is more than enough since the feature was implemented as a way to provide differences between two polls of the same result set. This video covers the visualization of monitoring data using agent service on SQL Server and another service on the server where DIMS is installed. The agent service is pulling data from the instance and send it back to the server where DIMS is installed, and the server service inserts that data in the database. This control, the monitoring control, is just taking that data and displaying it using charts. Although I have invested a lot of time in creating this proof of concept, I decided to stop working on it since the overall approach and advices received were that I should pull the data using extended events and not services. Parts of the code can still be reused if the company is already pulling some kind of information already. The only thing that needs to be done is to change the source of the data I am using for generating those charts. This video shows how to display using shapes the hierarchical view obtained from data stored in tabular data. I use for this example the output of sp_who2 stored procedure, but you can imagine that result set being retrieved from a repository database containing information about your servers. For example, we could create something that will return information about data stores, ESG hosts, servers in each environment, and so on by querying metadata stored by VMware in some SQL Server database. Or maybe the result come from an Excel file in which we manually entered information in a way in which we will be able to display it hierarchical. Once we have the data, we can start checking columns for which we want to create the hierarchy, and once it's created, we can choose to display it as shapes too. I am sure you have seen the difference in speed while generating the hierarchical view as text blocks and the view as shapes, and this is happening because to render on screen text boxes is more intensive than plain text blocks. The amount of connectors created to display the hierarchical view lead to the implementation of selecting shapes on canvas of specific type in order to speed the process of changing those shapes properties. Also, the fact that we can add hierarchical view side by side with others lead to the implementation of that gray rectangle, which allows to select all the shapes which falls under its area. What is next, and I'm sure you noticed it in the video, is to add the option to set the thickness of the shape borders. When I am generating the shapes, I set the thickness of the connectors to 1, but when I am loading them from disk, it's set by default to 3. It is set by default to 3 because with a thickness of 1, it is very hard to select a connector via mouse. If you check other professional tools, they have logic which checks a specific area around the mouse pointer, and if anything is overlapping that area, will change the mouse icon in order to let the user know that if he left click, then that object will be selected. I believe with ChatGPT that behavior can be obtained for sure, but the problem is that I need to make test over test to see if it will affect the current code. All of my tests are manual, and they are time consuming and boring, but not boring enough to write code that will perform those tests. In this video, we can see the tasks feature change to become a very small POC for a pipeline feature. The video is speeded up in order to deliver more content in a shorter period of time, but I noticed some operations were done so fast that you can barely see, hence feel free to change the speed of the video. You will see me opening some, I will call them pipelines, and generating for them the list of operations which are displayed on board. The board displays info, but sometimes, especially with scripts executed against more instances, or which have placeholders, it will be hard to see what it is doing, which is why we can generate the operations which starts with the task chain parent followed by the children item with tab, followed by the placeholder names, and their value item also with another tab. In some example, you can see me adding another task to the pipeline. Each task added on board is a parent, but when it starts to have children, then those children will become parent of its child. As we speak, placeholders are coming in two shapes. First is as the result of script execution output, and second, as being directly created on the task which will become a parent. The placeholder substitution is done by looping back the parents, and check if either placeholders are defined or a result set containing the placeholder exists. If one condition is met, then the placeholders are substituted, and we stop searching. Each task can be executed independent, or the parent task can be executed, which will trigger the execution of tasks one after another if no errors are encountered, or user is not stopping the pipeline by pressing the stop button of task with order ID 0. Next steps would be the logging of the operations, when tasks start, when it ended, and so on in order to keep track of history execution. Another steps might be for some tasks to store the output in the database for history purposes also. A part of those would be hunting for bugs, as the ones you saw in this video. Remaining of the video is just doing things covered up to this point, but for other task chains belonging to other boards. In this video, we can see the reports generated for the tasks. After thinking the best place for the reports, I decided to use the walls feature. In order to create the queries, I had to add code to generate the pivot statements or select statements used to represent data log for tasks. The video shows in the beginning some of the queries I generated before the video, while in the end I am showing how we can use Query Helper to generate the queries. Although video doesn't show it, I encountered a lot of conditions for which I haven't had any code written while trying to match Power BI output for the result sets. Even though I still have to decide for pie chart the amount of legend info I should write depending on the code, I noticed Power BI is writing less legend info than what I am writing. On top of all the previously mentioned issues, I noticed that my charts and dashboard feature were allowing the user to increase the distance from where the chart starts, vertically and horizontally, and decided to add it to charts on the wall feature. While performing the tests, I realized that, although the chart is starting from those positions, the elements on the charts and labels were not increasing/decreasing while changing the chart vertical and horizontal starting position. I had to address those too. Another time-consuming thing was to find a reasonable balance between the selections of the columns and generated statement. While generating the statement, I noticed that for implementing grouping using intervals, I need to implement 3 state checkboxes, and I had to rewrite code to take into account that. To summarize it, unfortunately, I haven't put on paper how the feature should look in the end, meaning a context menu with items like select, group by, and so on. To reach this, I went through multiple modifications, and each of them required redoing a lot of things a little bit differently. I did these because I am thinking to reuse this way of generating the code in other places, and I wanted to come to a working solution which is easier to use and modify to meet other use case scenarios. One of these scenarios might be to use it when I am performing advanced aggregations for data tables. In one of an older videos, DIMS aggregations, I aggregate data in a different way, and maybe I should replace that with the way I am showing in this video in Query Helper. In this short video, I am presenting the gauge chart. For the time being, I added it to walls feature and dashboard feature because those are the ones which chart the result of a TSQL query, meaning I have access to the names of the columns in the output. In the beginning, the chart was displaying a single color for the value, but I realized that sometimes, especially when you have more gauges on the same screen and you want to see easier which ones are closer to the target, you need to change the color of the value, which I implemented with those thresholds following the chart type. In the dashboard feature, you can see 3 examples of using the gauges, but you can imagine more use case scenarios. For example, you can create a gauge that will alert if there are any standard edition or enterprise edition in development environment. You can create a gauge which will display total number of CPUs or memory group by environment. We can create also a dashboard which will display for a server the number of failed backups for the databases on that server, or the number of failed consistency checks, or the buffer cache hit ratio, or PLE. I believe this chart type is more appropriate for specific type of information than the ones I already had. On top of that, the gauge chart would have been to next logical chart type I should have been creating after the pie chart and the donut chart, because donut is just a pie covered within white circle having a smaller radius on top of it, while gauge is the donut, but without drawing a full circle. At least this is how I implemented them. Next video will be to add the gauge chart to single chart and charts feature, but that will require more work because I need to provide the user a way to input the values for min, max, target, and value. I was thinking that in the right side of the gauge where I have space, I will add some text boxes with those names, and whenever user is clicking on it, then a pop-up will be displayed which will allow the user to select the value for the min, max, and so on. For the remaining of the video, you will see how the thresholds can be modified when it comes to the query used for a dashboard. In this video, I am showing the gauge for single chart. Like mentioned in the previous video for single chart control, I had to provide a way for the user to input the information together with a description of how the values on the screen were calculated. If you check the other post, you could see that the pop-up used to enter the data is similar with new column feature or shred feature presented in some other posts. I could have tried to add a helper, presenting user with the columns when square bracket is types like I did for new column feature, but this would have required more time and tests to implement it. Although it's not here yet, this is something that needs to be done because although not shown in the video, if you miss a column name by a letter, the code fails, and at this point I am not saving the formula entered to calculate the values unless the result of the formula is successful. In other words, this POC is working, but there are still things that can be improved in order to make it more useful. I noticed also that I'm calculating the radius based on canvas height, which for this control when hiding the result set, makes the gauge to start from a different position than the position starts when show data is expanded. For the time being, I don't know if I will add the logic to chart control because due to the initial size of the charts there and other things, the code I have here and I will copy this video will show the borders for the labels when grouping of data is done using multiple columns. I choose server repository script to retrieve the data that I will be using for this demonstration. If you pay attention to the lines for every action I am doing, you will see some inconsistencies between the borders for y-axis and x-axis. This is because of how I implemented them. The grouping on x-axis was done maybe 1 year ago, while the grouping on y-axis was done just 2 weeks ago, or less, using a totally different approach. While drawing the lines for x-axis, I have a vertical line for the first entry, but I don't have the last line for the last entry. I believe this is the same for y-axis. Another thing I noticed was that Power BI implementation is flawless, meaning that I haven't seen overlapping of these dotted lines. In my case, sometimes because of the positions I am drawing them, they overlap, and sometimes you might see a continuous line because 2 dotted lines are overlapping each other for some length. The reason might be because I start from specific positions while Microsoft might calculate to the digit. For example, for y-axis, like I mentioned, my text blocks are the same width and I start the dotted line from the x position of each text block, while Microsoft might could employ logic like I start from this position. The dots are every 3 pixels, my text block is 130 pixels long, hence my dotted line will most probably finish with a space, hence I should start with a dot. What I'm trying to say is that the appealing of a drawing requires not only talent but a lot of planning ahead and computations. Doing this demonstration, I realized something that I don't like, but might be easy to fix. If we increase the vertical starting point for charts having multiple grouping on x-axis, then if users switch it to a chart for which x-axis becomes y-axis, then xd margin should become yd margin in order for the user to have a seamless experience. For the time being, I am okay with changing those values manually, but this requires 2 operations that can be automated easily. The problem with adding things is that they require careful consideration and testing. The code I have now reached a complexity level which is not suitable for quick addition or removal of features because, like mentioned in the past, was not written by following Microsoft best practices which are in place to avoid just the situations in which I find myself now. For the remaining of the video, you will just see examples of sorting and scrolling of the result set. I was thinking if these operations should have a control which is part of the chart like Power BI has, or to still keeping them as part of the data grid I am using to display the data. Maybe in the future I will try to add some control that will allow the user to call the data grid event handlers already in place, because the current implementation means that chart needs to be drawn whenever I want to sort, which means 2 operations that can be skipped. In this video, you will see the proof of concept for executing SQL scripts from a folder using SQL CMD. The way to use this feature is to execute the script that will retrieve the script's names and some of the columns, which will allow you some kind of sorting, and once the result set was retrieved, to sort it to obtain the order in which you want to execute the scripts. Once sorting is completed, we select Execute SQL Script, which allows us to select the instances, databases, and the scripts we want to execute. The available instances are filtered to show only the instances in the same domain as the account used to launch the application. I wanted to allow execution of scripts against instances in other domains and launch SQL CMD as a different user, but what ChatGPT offered required a lot of things, not to mention that I understood close to nothing about that, hence I decided that if scripts have to be executed on instances in different domains, then the application should be launched again under a domain account from that domain. Going back to the available selections, you could see that in order to add remove databases, I chose to implement the removal when user clicks a database name which is already selected. This is true also for the script names. Choosing individual scripts allow us to change the initial order of the scripts in case we want to provide a specific order for the scripts. Once we chose the instances against we want to run the script and the databases and the scripts, we loop through all that information and create single entries, instance name, database name, and script name together with some additional columns which are useful when answering questions like duration, script output. Once SQL CMD invocation is finished, the information about that execution is updated and we take that information and insert it in the database for historical purposes. By default, when generate and display action is pressed and the window is already open, nothing is overwritten. The window is just maximized, hence if we need to refresh that window because we added another database or instance, then we need to close the window first and press the button. What was not tested was executing a deletion script that is 20 megabytes in size that generates 2 200,000 row messages like row was deleted and how those type of scripts affects the overall process like updating the script output column in the data grid and inserting the row in the database. These are things which requires more time, but for the time being I believe 80 to 90% of the feature is done. I noticed that the duration was not showing the right amount of time spent. In this video I will show use cases for the text compare feature in its current state of the development. We will retrieve the definitions of SQL objects from two instances by querying SQL modules. Once the result set is retrieved, we use the mini pivot feature shown in some previous posts to construct a table that will be used as input for the object definition comparison. This table contains a column for the object names, two columns designating the template and compare to template. In my implementation, right side or third column is the template and left side or second column is compare to template. The table containing this information is created automatically based on the input table based on the column names provided for the text compare options. If we want a smaller subset, we will use the filtering feature before pivoting the information. Since columns cannot be moved by the user, an option was provided for the user to switch the columns designating the template and compare the template. Another option was provided which helps when the object names that we want to compare are different. Once we disable the automatic building of the compare table, we have the possibility to populate the table manually and choose which objects will be in left and right. For the time being, it seems the code written is not covering all the possibilities, and you could see an error when I tried to add another row in the table with other two objects to be compared. The error was because the object name is for the time being the object name that we select and not a unique name. This will be fixed in the feature. The table contained at the minimum the information that we collect like number of lines, identical lines, and different lines. In order to show a second difference, another stored procedure was modified, and the entire process of comparison was repeated in order to see those differences. At the end of the video, I'm trying to show how we can compare tabular format using the text compare feature. The feature has one big drawback for which I couldn't find a solution yet. The issue is that when text comparison is performed, the application is not receiving any user input, which means that for the duration of the comparison, the application looked like unresponsive. A pop-up can be displayed with a progress bar on top of the main window for the duration of this process, but this is not what I see on the other applications, which means the solution is there. I just need to Google or ChatGPT more. The next steps would be to write more logic for keyboard interactions while modifying the text in rich text boxes. Another feature might be a button that will allow you to compare tabular data cell by cell and coloring the cells which are not identical. I believe this is something that I pursue it next because sometimes we might want a quick view of differences of some Excel files from disk. This video shows the latest updates when it comes to Excel file comparison. I added visual hints when it comes to tabular data comparison. These visual hints helps user to see what we compare and that the comparison is still in progress. I added on top of the data grids and rich text boxes, two text blocks and two progress bars which will show on the selected object the path to the object, and that computation is still in progress. On top of this, I added logic to remove rectangles if all the values belonging to a specific row are identical in both files, and add rectangles if values in a row are different from the values in a row in the other file. I added also some logic to decrease and increase the number of different words while user modifies the values. On top of this, I added code for saving these modifications back to the in-memory objects I am using to display the content of the Excel files. While testing the code for the options described above, I noticed that for the SP, who template file the rectangles are not displayed accurately in some cases, but displayed accurately in other cases. I tried to fix the issue, but I couldn't do it, which is why I'll try to make another video presenting this issue hopping that while making the video the idea or the solution will come to light. There are still many things to do in order to make it fully functional, but if I cannot solve the rectangles displaying issue in a few days, then I will start working in implementing menus for providing the folder from which files for template and compare to template needs to be read. I hope this POC for this feature will be done in the coming 2 weeks. I decided to start working on the menus for providing the location for the files we want to compare because of two main reasons. First is that the current implementation assumes that files are located on a single folder, and the input of that folder as seen in the previous video is not user-friendly. I will try to use open files dialog to let user select the files they want to compare. Second reason is that the POC I plan for saving the modifications back to disk requires more logic in case the Excel file we read have multiple sheets. This video presents the Discover and Query feature. Although the application comes with a lot of built-in scripts, those scripts cannot cover all the scenarios or retrieve all the information available for a specific application or operating system. This is why I provided the user a way to create scripts querying different repositories via PowerShell. This is a feature which allows us to query WMI repositories, SQL Server management object, or to call specific PowerShell templates. The graphical user interface might lack appealing, but DIMS application is more about increasing user knowledge and its opportunity to retrieve the required information than to provide beautiful interface. For example, if one of the requests received is involving services or processes, the user can check this feature to see what is available when it comes to that topic. This video presents overlapping display feature. Although it was created to display the overlapping when it comes to SQL Server agent jobs, the code behind can be used to display information about any other process that requires time to complete. The overlapping chart type was created for this, but I believe that using this feature to see the overlapping is better than using the overlapping chart type. I believe a combination of the following steps might be used to use this feature with any result set. Execute script to retrieve the result set. Use distinct values feature to keep only the needed column. Call this feature providing as input the outcome of the distinct values feature. This video presents the compare feature. It was created to compare result sets and to provide information about the differences. One of its usage might be to select the services and their status and startup type using the Discover and Query feature of the application before and after a server restart, for example, in order to see if after restart the system is as you found it when it comes to its services and information you gather about them. Of course, it can be used if the usage of the hierarchical display doesn't yield the outcome you want in showing the differences between two servers. It can be used for other purposes too, as you can see in the video, checking if two servers have the same builds or databases exist on both servers. This video presents the chronology feature. This feature was created in order to visualize data having a column containing a date-time column in the order they appear. When troubleshooting an issue, we retrieve data, which most of the time has a timestamp associated with it. Since data is spread or found in different places, and each place provides different data, we end up with information that is hard to consume. To make the most of this data, we want to take rows from each result set we have and put them in a chronology order. This will help us to better understand a chain of events and make assumptions in regards to cause and effect. This video presents the query store retrieval of data and consuming of it. Query store is a feature in SQL Server that allows us to see information about execution plan. I wanted to have an overview of the queries and their plans. In an SSMS, due to the nature of the differences between values for each measure column and the chart type used, this was impossible. Hence, I decided to give it a try to use funnel chart type and display each column in its own chart sorted descending, thus allowing me to obtain the overview. This gives us a better visibility on what is the consumption for each metric for that specific query ID. I did the same for the plan ID, and when it comes to the execution plan comparison, I chose a tabular format, mainly because I couldn't create a graphical one, but also because I wanted to be able to spot differences at different levels and easily copying them, sharing them, or using them further in other purposes. I recorded the video on a small laptop, so the view will be better if we have a bigger monitor. As with the other things in the application, I need to find a place where to put a text box that displays on mouse over more information about the chart, column, values, and so on. Although some things are self-explanatory, they still need more context in order to fully understand the execution plans and what you see there. Thanks for your patience, and let me summarize again the benefits and shortcomings of the application. List of benefits. 1. The main benefit of the application is that it provides a GUI that can be used by various teams to retrieve data using TSQL scripts and PowerShell scripts, consuming it, visualizing it, and sharing it with other people as part of day-to-day activities. 2. Using a tool like this can decrease the time required by a newcomer to learn and perform its new day-to-day activities. 3. It gives the company access to the source code, meaning more insight about what they might do by themselves in the future and what they still need to acquire from software vendors. 4. It gives company the chance to provide to its top performers in each operational team a tool on which they can actively participate and develop, which in end will increase the employee retention. 5. It gives DevOps team in each department a backbone on which they can build on without asking them to start from zero. List of shortcomings. 1. The biggest shortcoming is that the tool was created by a SQL Server DBA, not a developer, meaning it was created by not following specific best practices or best-of-the-art programming techniques. 2. The application and all its features were not tested to the limit, not to mention that some of the features are just proof of concept or proof of concept taken a little bit further. 3. The application hard-coded information is helping the SQL Server DBA in performing his day-to-day activities and is not covering a broader audience, which means that in case application needs to be used by other teams, then someone needs to hard-code the scripts they use to perform their activities. Those being said, the conclusion is that DIMS should be seen more as an how-to application that improves employees' productivity and provides opportunities to improve it by adding new features, finishing the current features, and so on, based on the fact that the company will have access to the source code and increase its footprint when it comes to what you can do rather than a fully functional application that does A, B, C, D flawlessly.